How convenient, Leo said, his eyes narrowed. I suppose you never bothered to ask the girl if she desired the arrangement? Irrelevant. The agreement was all to her benefit. It was her fortune to be born a beauty, and she would learn how to profit from it. Besides, they're all prostitutes, aren't they? It's only a question of circumstance and price. Latimer paused, smiling quizzically. She told you none of this? Leo ignored the question. What happened? On the day Catherine was delivered to my house, before I'd sampled the goods, a man forced his way in and took her. Literally abducted her. One of my footmen tried to stop him and took a bullet in the leg for his pains. By the time I realized what was happening, the man had already taken Catherine past the front threshold. I can only assume that he had lost the private auction and decided to take what he wanted by force. Catherine disappeared after that. I've wanted her for 8 years. Latimer gave a low laugh. And now she's turned up in your possession. I don't know that I'm surprised, really. You've always been a devious bastard. How did you manage to acquire her? Leo was momentarily silent. His chest was filled with searing anguish for Catherine's sake. 15. Betrayed by those who should have protected her. Sold to a man without morals or mercy. The thought of what Latimer would have done to Catherine made Leo ill. Latimer's depravities wouldn't have stopped at mere physical violation, he would have destroyed her soul. No wonder Catherine found it impossible to trust anyone. It was the only rational response to impossible circumstances. Leveling a cold stare at Latimer, Leo reflected that if he were just a bit less civilized, he would have killed the bastard on the spot. However, he would have to settle for keeping him away from Catherine, and doing whatever was necessary to keep her safe. She is owned by no one, Leo said with care. Good. Then She is under my protection, however. Latimer arched a brow, amused. What am I to infer from that? Leo was deadly serious. That you are to go nowhere near her. That she'll never have to endure the sound of your voice or the insult of your presence ever again. Advertisement dash. I'm afraid I can't oblige you. I'm afraid you'll have to. A coarse laugh erupted. Surely you're not threatening me. Leo smiled coldly. Much as I always tried to ignore your inebriated ravings, Latimer, a few things did stick in my memory. Some of your confessions of misconduct would make more than a few people unhappy. I know enough of your secrets to land you in Marshalsea prison without so much as a chum ticket. And if that's not enough, I would be more than willing to resort to bashing your skull in with a blunt object. In fact, I'm becoming quite enthused about the idea. Seeing the astonishment in the other man's eyes, Leo smiled without humor. I see you grasp my sincerity. That's good. It might save us both some inconvenience. He paused to give his next statement greater impact. And now I'm going to instruct my servants to escort you off my estate. You're not welcome. The older man's face went livid. You'll regret having made an enemy of me, Ramsay. Not nearly as much as I've regretted having once made a friend of you. What happened to Catherine? Amelia asked Leo when he returned to the drawing room. Why did she leave so suddenly? Lord Latimer accosted her, he said shortly. Amelia shook her head in bewildered outrage. That repulsive goat, why would he dare? Because that's what he does. He's an affront to polite company and every standard of moral decency. A better question would be why the devil we invited him. We didn't invite him, we invited his parents. Obviously he came in their stead. She threw him an accusing glance. And he's an old acquaintance of yours. From now on, let's assume that every old acquaintance of mine is either a lecher or a criminal and should be kept far away from the estate and the family. Did Lord Latimer harm Catherine? Amelia asked anxiously. Not physically. But I want someone to see to her. I expect she's in her room. Will you go to her, or send Wynne? Yes, of course. Don't ask questions. Just make certain she's all right. A half-hour later, Wynne came to Leo with the information that Catherine had declined to say anything other than she wished to retire undisturbed. It was probably for the best, Leo thought. Although he wanted to go up to her and offer comfort, he would let her sleep. On the morrow, they would sort everything out. Leo awakened at the hour of 9 and went to Catherine's door. It was still closed, and there was no sound from within. It took all his self-control to keep from opening the door and waking her. However, she needed to rest, especially in light of what he intended to discuss with her later. It seemed to Leo as he went downstairs that the entire household, including servants, was practically sleepwalking. The ball hadn't ended until 4 in the morning, and even then some of the guests had been reluctant to leave. Sitting in the breakfast room, Leo drank a mug of strong tea and watched as Amelia, Wynne, and Maripin came in. Camp, always a late riser, was still absent. "What happened to Catherine last night?" Amelia asked quietly. "And what of Lord Latimer's precipitate departure?" More than a few tongues were wagging. Leo had considered whether or not to discuss Catherine's secrets with the rest of the family. They would have to be told something. And although he would not go into detail, he felt it would be easier for Catherine if someone else gave the explanation. "As it turns out," he said carefully, "when Cat was a girl of 15, her so-called family made an arrangement with Latimer." "What kind of arrangement?" Amelia asked. Her eyes widened as Leo sent her a speaking glance. "Dear Lord." Thankfully Rutledge intervened before she was forced to. Leo broke off, surprised by the note of fury in his own voice. He struggled to moderate it before continuing. "I needn't elaborate. However, it's obviously not a part of Kat's past that she's fond of dwelling on. She's been in hiding for the past 8 years. Latimer recognized her last evening, and upset her badly. I'm sure she'll awaken this morning with some notion of leaving Hampshire." Maripin's features were stern, but his dark eyes were warm with compassion. "There's no need for her to go anywhere. She's safe with us." Leo nodded, rubbing the edge of the teacup with the pad of his thumb. "I'll make that clear when I talk with her." "Leo," Amelia said carefully, "are you certain that you're the best one to manage this? With your history of quarreling?" He gave her a hard look. "I'm certain." "Amelia?" A hesitant voice came from the doorway. It was Beatrix, wearing a ruffled blue dressing gown, her dark hair trailing in wild locks. Worry had creased her forehead. "Good morning, dear," Amelia said warmly. "There's no need to rise early, if you don't wish to." Beatrix replied in a tumble of words. "I wanted to see how the injured owl I'm keeping in the barn is faring. And I was also looking for Dodger, because I haven't seen him since yesterday afternoon. So I opened Miss Marks's door just a sliver, to see if he was in there. You know how he likes to sleep in her slipper box." "But he wasn't there?" Amelia asked. Beatrix shook her head. "And neither was Miss Marks. Her bed is made, and her carpet bag is gone. And I found this on the dressing table." She handed a piece of folded paper to Amelia, who opened it and scanned the written lines. "What does it say?" Leo asked, already on his feet. Amelia handed it to him without a word. "Please forgive me for leaving without saying goodbye. There is no other choice. I can never express the gratitude I feel for your generosity and kindness. Hopefully you will not think it presumptuous of me to say that although you are not my family in truth, you are the family of my heart. I will miss all of you. Ever your Catherine Marks." "Good God," Leo growled, tossing the folded paper to the table, "the drama in this household is more than a man can tolerate. I would have assumed that we could have had a reasonable discussion in the comfort of Ramsay House, but instead she flees in the dark of night and leaves a letter filled with sentimental twaddle." "It's not twaddle," Amelia said defensively. Wynne's eyes filled with compassionate tears as she read the note. "Kev, we must find her." Maripin slid a hand over hers. "She's gone to London," Leo muttered. To his knowledge, Harry Rutledge was the only person Cat could turn to. Although Harry and Poppy had been invited to the ball, hotel business had kept them in London. Anger, urgency, exploded inside Leo from nowhere. He tried not to show it, but the discovery that Cat had left him, had filled him with a possessive fury unlike anything he had ever felt before. "The male coach usually leaves Stony Cross at 5:30, Maripin said. "Which means you have a fair chance of overtaking her before she reaches Guildford. I'll go with you, if you like." "So will I," Wynne said. "We should all go," Amelia declared. "No," Leo said grimly. "I'm going alone. When I catch up with Marks, you won't want to be there." "Leo," Amelia asked suspiciously, "what are you planning to do to her? Why do you always insist on asking questions when you know you won't like the answers?" "Because, being an optimist," she said tartly, "I always hope I'm wrong." The coach schedule was limited, now that the mails were most often loaded onto locomotive trains. Catherine had been fortunate to obtain a seat inside a coach bound for London. She didn't feel all that fortunate, however. She was miserable and chilled, even in the stuffy interior of the coach. The vehicle was filled with passengers outside and in, with parcels and luggage tied precariously up top. The whole thing felt dangerously top-heavy as it rumbled over rough patches of road. 10 miles per hour, one of the gentlemen passengers had estimated, admiring the strength and endurance of the team of massive drays. Morosely Catherine stared out the window as the meadows of Hampshire rolled into the heavy woodland and bustling market towns of Surrey. There was only one other woman inside the coach, a plump and well-dressed matron who was travelling with her husband. She dozed in the opposite corner from Catherine's, emitting delicate snores. Whenever the coach jolted, it caused the objects on her hat to rattle and quiver. And quite a hat it was, adorned with clusters of artificial cherries, a plume, and a small stuffed bird. At midday the coach stopped at an inn where a new team would be put to, in preparation for the next stretch of road. Groaning in relief at the prospect of a brief respite, the passengers poured out of the vehicle and into the tavern. Catherine carried her tapestry carpet bag, afraid to leave it in the coach. The bag was a weighty affair containing a nightgown, undergarments and stockings, an assortment of combs and pins and a hairbrush, a shawl, and a voluminous novel with a mischievous inscription from Beatrix. "This story is guaranteed to entertain Miss Marks without improving her in the least. With love from the incorrigible B.H." The inn appeared moderately well appointed but hardly luxurious, the kind of place that stablemen and workingmen frequented. Catherine glanced disconsolately at a wooden yard wall covered with posting bills, and turned to watch a pair of ostlers change the team. She nearly dropped the carpet bag at the side of the carriage yard as she felt a rustle of independent movement within. Not as if something had shifted around, it was more like, something was alive in there. Her heartbeat became rapid and disorganized, like the bobbing of small potatoes in boiling water. "Oh no," she whispered. Turning to face the wall, trying desperately to keep the bag out of view, she unlooped the fastener and opened the bag a mere 2 inches. A sleek little head popped out. Catherine was aghast to behold a familiar pair of bright eyes and a set of twitching whiskers. "Dodger," she whispered. The ferret chattered happily, the corners of his mouth curling in his perpetual ferret smile. "Oh, you naughty boy. He must have slipped into the bag while she had been packing. What am I to do with you?" she asked in despair. Pushing his head back down into the bag, she stroked him to keep him quiet. There was no choice but to take the dratted creature all the way to London, and give him into Poppy's keeping until he could be returned to Beatrix. As soon as one of the ostlers shouted, "All ready," Catherine went back into the coach and settled the carpet bag at her feet. Opening the top once more, she peeked at Dodger, who was coiled in the folds of her nightgown. "Be quiet," she said sternly. "And don't cause trouble." "I beg your pardon?" came the matron's voice as she entered the carriage, her hat plume trembling with indignation. "Oh, ma'am, I wasn't speaking to you," Catherine said hastily. "I was lecturing myself." "Indeed?" The woman's eyes narrowed as she plopped into the opposite seat. Catherine sat stiffly. She waited for a telltale rustling of the carpet bag or a betraying noise. However, Dodger remained quiet. The matron closed her eyes and lowered her chin to the high, mounded shelf of her bosom. In a matter of 2 minutes, she appeared to be dozing again. Perhaps this wouldn't be difficult after all, Catherine thought. If the woman remained asleep, and the gentlemen resumed their newspaper reading, she might be able to smuggle Dodger to London unnoticed. But just as Catherine allowed herself to teeter on the brink of hope, the entire situation went tumbling out of her control. Without warning, Dodger poked his head out, surveyed his interesting new surroundings, and slithered from the bag. Catherine's lips parted in a silent cry, and she froze with her hands arrested in midair. The ferret ran up the upholstered seat to the matron's beckoning hat. A nibble or two, and his sharp teeth had severed a cluster of artificial cherries from the hat. Triumphantly he scrambled down the seat and leaped into Catherine's lap with his prize. He did a happy ferret war dance, a series of hops and wriggles. "No," Catherine whispered, grabbing the cherries from him and trying to shove him back into the carpet bag. Dodger protested, squeaking and chattering. The woman spluttered and blinked, waking irritably at the noise. What? Cat went still, her pulse thundering in her ears. Dodger streaked up around Cat's neck and hung limply, playing dead. Like a scarf, Cat thought, struggling to repress a burst of demented giggles. The matron's indignant gaze arrowed to the bunch of cherries in her lap. Why, those are from my hat, aren't they? Were you attempting to steal those while I was napping? Catherine sobered immediately. No, oh no, it was an accident. I'm so. You ruined it, and this was my best hat, it cost £2.06. Give it back to me but she broke off with a strangled sound, her mouth rounding into a calcified O as Dodger leaped to Catherine's lap, seized the cherries, and disappeared into the safety of the carpet bag. The woman screamed with ear-splitting force, exiting the coach in a full-rigged tumult of skirts. 5 minutes later, Catherine and the carpet bag had been unceremoniously ejected from the coach. She stood at the verge of the carriage yard, assaulted by a concurrence of strong smells, dung, horses, urine, combining queasily with scents of cooked meat and hot bread coming from the tavern. The coachman mounted to the box, ignoring Catherine's outraged protests. "But I paid to go all the way to London," she cried. "You paid for one passenger, not two. 2 passengers get half the journey." Incredulously Catherine looked from his stony expression to the carpet bag in her hand. "This is not a passenger. We're a quarter hour behind time because of you and your rat," the coachman said, squaring his elbows and cracking the whip. "He's not my rat, wait, how am I to get to London?" One of the ostlers replied implacably as the coach set out. "Next mails come tomorrow morning, miss. Maybe they'll let you and your pet ride up top." Catherine glared at him. "I don't want to ride up top, I paid to ride inside, all the way to London, and I consider this a form of larceny. What am I to do until tomorrow morning?" The ostler, a young man with a long-handled mustache, shrugged. "You might ask if there's a room available," he suggested. "Although they probably won't take kindly to guests with rats." He looked beyond her as another vehicle came into the yard. "Out of the way, miss, or you'll get thrown down by the carriage." Infuriated, Catherine stomped to the entrance of the inn. She looked into her carpet bag, where Dodger was playing with the cherries. Was it not enough, she thought in frustration, that she'd just